Hello, today is the 24th of November 2014 and a subject that I thought was actually quite interesting, that I had time to browse the internet and such like and watch some people's videos on paranormal themed information and experiences. And I'm remembering now other people's channels, so please forgive me, I don't remember always other people's channels unless I'm interacting with them on a fairly regular basis. So, but the channel, one of the channels that I follow is called Throck Paranormal, I think that's how you pronounce it. Interesting work going on there with a guy called Austin, and he put a video up recently about various different things and about his sort of paranormal work and such like, and I can actually resonate with what he was saying in his video, because I realised this many years ago anyway, and it's becoming more pronounced, I think, as it gets easier and easier for people to communicate with spirits. Okay, and I absolutely agree with what he is saying about having a purpose to what you're doing. You know, everyone can keep putting videos up. I mean, I put up the odd ones every now and then, but generally I tend to put the ones that I've had, that may have had personal experience that meant something to me or were a particularly good session. But with the if you like, the massive influx now pretty much everywhere, especially on places like YouTube, with groups coming up all over the place and people getting together, and I mean, I don't know how many SB7s have actually been sold. I'm sure it's running into hundreds of thousands by now. And of course, anyone who's seriously into paranormal in general or talking to spirits and such like, are always, it's very easy. You can go pretty much anywhere and talk to spirits, and you could keep just doing that all the time, asking the same questions, doing the same thing, going to the same places, getting the same responses, and such like, and it becomes, if you like, monotonous. It becomes boring. It becomes samey all the time. It just becomes almost like a chore that, not that I tire of actually watching any of these things, but I do understand the reasoning behind, or the thought processes behind where he's coming from, to do with, like, just keep producing videos. I mean, I do an awful lot more paranormal stuff than I'm actually putting up to YouTube. I've had some really personal stuff that's come through for me personally. I'm not going to put those up on YouTube. I've done some specific sessions about specific information. Again, I'm not going to start posting those up to YouTube or saying anything about them, because they are personal to me, or they're personal to someone else, and you don't need to do it. Again, I absolutely agree with also what he was saying about, I mean, it's all very fascinating. It's all very fascinating and all very valid as well. I mean, this stuff shouldn't be taken lightly by any means, and the fact that we can do it is just, amazing. And I think it helps people to actually understand, people who are not, if you like, into the paranormal as such, or are believers that, a spirit world exists. It's interesting that people can see that and become, if you like, believers in it. But there does become a limit, and one of my philosophies has always been, with all of this stuff, is that there has to be a purpose to it. You kind of have to have a reason for doing it, other than just doing it just because you can. It has to be for something a little bit more than just keep recording EVPs and sessions and stuff like that, because it's almost, you kind of have to think, well, what's the point of it? You know, you just have to think that there has to be more to it than just keep asking the same questions, and you know. So it is interesting. Absolutely agree. I like exploring different ways of doing things. Like I don't like just, you know, sitting at home, for instance, in my office in a kind of a controlled environment and doing these things, because I just know I'm going to be able to get EVPs all the time and responses to questions and stuff. So, you know, this is why I've already said in previous videos what I'm going to be doing to explore a little bit more and go beyond the general norm of sort of paranormal investigation. I think personally as well, and I was thinking this at the weekend, that you could almost say the same thing about people who keep investigating and groups who keep investigating the same sites all the time. You know, we have a castle here in Oxford City, and it's really well known that it's haunted. You know, that it contains spirits from a pretty horrific period of history here in Oxford. But do we need to keep going back there and getting all these, you know, doing all these sessions and getting all these EVPs? I mean, it's I've noticed as well, I'm not saying that this is wrong, okay? You know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing it. I'm just saying sometimes I think we have to, and I do question whether it's really necessary for, you know, thousands of people every single year to visit the same site as a tourist attraction for spirits. You know, is it really necessary? We know these things are there. If 10 people or 10 groups of people have already been there and have documented the fact that it, you know, a site has got something, you know, has got paranormal activity, do we need to keep going there ourselves to do it? Why do people want to keep going there? Is it because they want to experience it themselves? You know, I've thought myself, I'll go to Oxford Castle and wander around with a recorder, and I'm pretty certain that I've been around there many times, and I felt, you know, even before it became a tourist attraction, you know, I've felt places. It's a pretty dire kind of place, really. I mean, it was a prison, for crying out loud, and a pretty archaic prison, and, you know, over hundreds of years there was all sorts of atrocities going on there. One of the biggest ones, I think, was the fact that all the female prisoners and such like, not that this is any different from probably any other prison, but all the female prisoners and such like were being raped on a fairly regular basis over a long period of time, and any children that were, you know, as a result of those activities were basically dumped into a moat. And when the castle was being renovated and turned into a hotel, as it is now, and a, you know, restaurant, they found, you know, thousands of bones of children. You know, pretty horrific. I don't suppose really it's a particularly nice place to go, and there has, you know, they've actually got like a tourist attraction. But again, okay, I'm waffling, but, you know, the point I'm trying to get across is, you know, is having a purpose to what we're actually doing, I think, is actually important. Communicating with spirits on a regular basis, I think, is important. You know, pretty much everyone that I know in the paranormal realm that I'm involved in do communicate with the same spirits over and over again on a regular basis. You know, there's a purpose to that, because you're communicating with people that you kind of know, even if they're not of this plane. So, you know, but I think to keep randomly going around communicating with spirits, you know, I keep going back to do you randomly go around talking to people all the time? You know, I don't think as humans we generally do. There usually has to be a reason for it. You know, you don't just go up to someone in the street and start asking them questions about their life and then just wander off. Why would you do the same in the spirit world? Unless there was a reason for it, you know? Anyway, you know, conversation. I'm more than, you know, I'm very happy that people leave comments below. I'd like to hear other people's thoughts about all these things. You know, there are groups out there, myself included. I like to help people. That's why I do it. I like to help people come to terms with paranormal activity, the fact that they're not going crazy, that they're not, you know, they're not going mad and they're hearing voices in their head and, you know, all of these things. And that's why I do it, you know. And for me, there's a large part of that is the psychology. So to me, they go hand in hand. You know, and the technology bit goes hand in hand with the psychology bit. You know, for me, there is a purpose behind it all, and I just like helping people. At the end of the day, that's why I do it. I'm fascinated by the technology of it, but I'm also fascinated by the help and the relief that it can give people, you know. And to me, that's the purpose. For me, that is my purpose in doing it. And I know that that is the purpose for a lot of paranormal people. Some do it for entertainment, some do it because they're inquisitive. You know, there's a whole host of reasons. So I think it's important, really, if you're into the paranormal side of things, there has to be, you know, there has to be a reason or a purpose behind it. I think it's just good practice for anything that you do in life, really. If you've got a purpose behind it, it means something. Whether it means something to you or something to someone else, you know, that's the important thing. Just like I liken it to tourism. Okay, that's going to be my way of expressing this. Tourists will all get into a bus, and you know, we're a tourist city here in Oxford, and we get hundreds of buses a day full of thousands and thousands of tourists all coming around. And I guess most of the time the purpose of their visit is to just say that they've been to Oxford. You know, that they've been to Oxford, UK, they've got some photographs and whatever. And you see them, I observe them. You know, they wander around, they're all sticking their cameras in the air all at the same time, and they're all listening to the same tour guides telling the same story about Oxford City and blah blah blah, and then, you know, they're satisfied with whatever it is that they came to Oxford for, and they all get back on the bus and then they're off to somewhere else. Out of that coachload of people, there will always be an element of tourists who will have a purpose for being on that bus and for coming to Oxford, you know. And I think it's the same. It's the same for paranormal, you know. The majority of people will be doing it for, you know, whatever reason, for entertainment, or it's just a fad, or it's just something they're inquisitive about, and they dip into it and then they dip out of it and then they're gone. You know, I really, really wonder how many of these PSB 7s are being used, you know, for a real purpose other than entertainment. Other than people can just say, oh yeah, well I spoke to spirits today, fascinating, boom, boring, boom, you know, and that's it. That's the end of it. So yeah, quite interesting. Anyway, I'm waffling. Thank you very much for watching if you've got this far, and I shall speak to you again soon.